It's the Beth Cahill Show. And now, here's Beth.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome back to another week of the Beth Cahill Show. Today is going to be a packed 30 minutes. I want to get into the Iowa caucuses, the results of that. We'll talk about the State of the Union address from the president and his acquittal in the impeachment case against him. So stick around. Let's start with the Democrat Iowa caucuses that took place on Monday night. And what a night that was. By Thursday, we still did not have a winner in Iowa for the Democrats. The night of the caucus, there was all sorts of confusion around an app that they had come up with that was supposed to streamline the process from each caucus to the headquarters. When the app failed to transmit this information, though, the night was thrown into complete chaos. You had, basically every Democrat candidate fighting for airtime. You could switch around to all the cable news networks, and they're all fighting for airtime, and they were all claiming victory in Iowa. It was actually quite insane to watch, and no one actually knew who won. So you got all the candidates on the air talking about this big victory that they had in Iowa, and no one really knew who had won. So what we did take out of that night, though, was a really disappointing performance by the former Vice President Joe Biden. Joe Biden took fourth place in Iowa. So we may not know everything about Iowa yet, but that we do know. We know that it was incredibly disappointing for that campaign. I mean, this is the former vice president's third time running for president. He is the VP of a two-term, incredibly popular president in Barack Obama. The fact that Joe Biden took fourth place in Iowa is a really big deal for that campaign. Joe Biden is also not expected to finish in the top three in New Hampshire on Tuesday. His first victory is supposed to come in South Carolina. And all I can say is that if he loses big in Iowa, loses again in New Hampshire, and can't close the deal in South Carolina, I think it's safe to say that his campaign will be done. Pete Buttigieg overperformed in Iowa, but nonetheless, Bernie and Pete are basically going to split delegates coming out of Iowa. They're each going to get about 10, which is the largest amount to be distributed, and that it'll go to those two. I think Pete Buttigieg beat Bernie by like a 0.1%. But the story here is the overperformance by Buttigieg's campaign. I don't think anybody really saw that coming. In the polling, he was suggesting to win third or fourth. So Elizabeth Warren finishing third. But Bernie was supposed to win Iowa and win it, by a larger margin than he did. So now, because of the chaos that happened in Iowa, there are all sorts of conspiracy theories going around that the DNC is, trying to sabotage Bernie's campaign, similar to how people believed that they did in 2016. I'm not going to engage with that. But what I will say is that when you're completely incompetent and you're not able to do the simple task of counting votes, you open yourself up to those type of conspiracy theories. Not to mention the other part of that is by failing to get the vote count right on Monday night, they didn't give any candidate the momentum that they should have had going into New Hampshire. That's what's great about Iowa is they're the first state to vote, and you kind of get some momentum on your back if you're the victor in those races, and you can go into New Hampshire, and usually your polling numbers will go up from that. And everyone was kind of robbed of that moment. New Hampshire, again, it's on Tuesday. I'm expecting that Bernie Sanders will win that race. It's a neighboring state to his home state of Vermont, and he, remains very, very popular in his home state. And this is just my prediction, but I do think the nomination for the Democrats is going to come down to Bernie Sanders and Pete Buttigieg. I think Elizabeth Warren and Joe Biden are going to be out by Nevada. It's my prediction. We'll see what happens. Moving on, though, to another thing that happened last week was the State of the Union address by President Trump.
And my fellow citizens, 3 years ago, we launched the Great American Comeback. Tonight, I stand before you to share the incredible results. Jobs are booming, incomes are soaring, poverty is plummeting, crime is falling, confidence is surging, and our country is thriving and highly respected again. I am thrilled to report to you tonight that our economy is the best it has ever been. Our military is completely rebuilt, with its power being unmatched anywhere in the world, and it's not even close. Our borders are secure. Our families are flourishing. Our values are renewed. Our pride is restored. And for all of these reasons, I say to the people of our great country and to the members of Congress, the state of our union is stronger than ever before. Never forget that the only victories that matter in Washington are victories that deliver for the American people. The people are the heart of our country. Their dreams are the soul of our country, and their love is what powers and sustains our country. We must always remember that our job is to put America first.
So there were different reactions from different people regarding the State of the Union address. You could literally flip around to different cable channels, and it's as if they watched two different speeches. I actually thought it was one of the president's best speeches to date. There was something in there for everyone. There was something in there for his base, for independents, and if the Democrats are being fair, there was actually several things in there for them as well. My husband, who's not into politics at all, he watched the speech with me, and I kept saying to him, Trump is actually out-democrating the Democrats, if that's even a thing. So much of what he spoke about are their issues. And it was extraordinary to watch because if you saw the reaction from some of the Democrats, you would never have known that these are actually issues that they're supposed to care about. They're signature issues. Opportunity zones is something everyone should cheer about. He talked about infrastructure, rebuilding fallen down bridges, bad roads, the transportation systems. He talked about lowering prescription drug costs. Those are all issues the Democrats campaign on. They're the issues that they say they claim to want to get done. But if you watched the speech, you would think that they despised every one of those issues by the looks on their faces. The speech was an optimistic future for America. He was touting his accomplishments. And by the way, every president does that. You know, the coverage was, oh, it was a big campaign rally. No, every president talks about their accomplishments at the State of the Union. I mean, that's what they do. They talk about what they have accomplished as president. That is the State of the Union. He then went on to paint a picture for where America is going. President Trump is very good at creating visuals for people. He is good at imagery. He uses people to show where he's going on certain issues. And that is exactly what he did in this speech. He would tell a story of, you know, a great American hero, and then he would build that into a policy that he has. He talked about bringing home troops from overseas. Then a few moments later, he had a soldier come out that was reunited with his wife and his child for the first time. Or the little girl that he gave a scholarship to so that she was able to now go to the school of her choice. He tied that in with opportunity zones. He told the story of a man who had lost his brother who, you know, was murdered. So he goes on to tell this heartbreaking story. Everyone's completely involved in listening. And then he reminds people that because of California's sanctuary city policy, that was able to happen. President Trump is really good at this in particular. He came from television. He is good at producing these type of moments. So at the end of his speech, and after several, feel-good moments, he goes on to end the speech telling America that the best is yet to come. And as he's ending this speech, Nancy Pelosi lifts up his speech in front of the cameras and tears up his State of the Union address. People can argue that Trump snubbed her at the beginning when she tried to shake his hand. I honestly couldn't tell by looking whether he even saw her hand or not, but let's say that he did, and he chose not to shake her hand. At that point, she actually could have had the upper hand. It could have looked like Trump was being petty and Nancy got to walk away with a win. Instead, what we saw was her hatred on full display for the world to see, tearing up a speech that had American heroes mentioned in it. It had stories of American citizens that are no longer with us, American success stories. And let's be clear, it's not about her ripping up the speech only. That was incredibly disrespectful. But it was the faces that she continually made behind his back all night long, the shaking of the head when she didn't like something. I mean, truly, everyone saw it all night, the entire speech. So I think the tearing up of the speech was just the final blow to a night full of indignities by the Speaker of the House. C-SPAN aired the State of the Union, and after the speech, they opened up their phone lines to callers to get their reaction. I want to play a few of them for you. It's important to note, though, I really want you to know that I did not just take a few of the worst ones. This is what every call sounded like.
I've been a Democrat for 70-something years. And what I've seen tonight of the Democrat Party, I am changing my mind. I mean, I'll probably still be a Democrat. But far as I'm electing for a goddamn Democrat, never again.
I am a Democrat as well, but no longer will I vote Democrat. I think it's outrageous that they sat there when all these good things are happening to our country and how much we love our country, and they looked like they hated our country. And Nancy Pelosi, the whole time she's sitting up there with a disgusting look on her face, it's outrageous. I will never vote Democrat again, and I'm sick of it, and my whole family feels the same way. My husband, my friends are sitting here, all former Democrats. We all voted for Hillary last time, and therefore never, ever will we ever vote Democrat again. You know, it's always portrayed that the Democrats don't love their country. Well, we love our country, and we want to see it succeed. But it appears to us that our Democratic Party has been stolen from us by a bunch of communists, and no longer will our family ever vote Democrat again.
I am literally disgusted with Pelosi and the Democrats' behavior, the way she teared up his speech behind him at the end. I was a registered Democrat. I've gone independent. I'm leaning GOP now.
With a simple rip of a paper, Nancy Pelosi has pretty much sealed the deal of a re-election of Donald Trump.
So fatigue and complete irritation is really starting to set in for people. Almost anger, if you can hear it in their voices. These are people who just want the government to get back to work. It is a mistake to continue down this path of complete resistance to Trump. Trump is resilient. We keep seeing it time and time again. The president has aligned himself with a large portion of the American people. Like him or not, he does not say disparaging things about big pockets of the American people. Instead of disparaging them, he aligns himself with them. And this is something that the Democrats and the media have never understood. It's something I cannot for the life of me figure out how they have not picked up on this. When the president goes to a rally or talks to supporters, he talks about, we have done this, or this is a movement about you. He aligns himself as one of them, not somebody above them. And it's allowed him to have this connection with voters that I have never seen before. You could argue that Barack Obama had the same connection and he was a two-term president. I mean, those callers from C-SPAN were former Democrats and one independent. When you start to lose your own party, it should be a wake-up call. And the problem with the Democrat Party leaders is that they're not paying attention. They're either not paying attention or they don't care. It's why they lost in 2016, and it's why they're going to probably lose again in 2020. People want to see an American comeback story. We like it. We like to see it in the movies. We like to hear about it in real life. It's something that Americans cling to. They relate to it. And Trump has painted himself as the leader, but also, and equally important, as the underdog that's fighting for people. He's fighting for America. He's fighting for you. And it's a winning strategy, as we've seen. The more they attack him, the stronger his support becomes from his voters. Gallup usually underestimates their polls. This is not a poll that Trump typically does well in. His approval rating is 49% in Gallup right now. It's the highest approval rating he has ever had in his presidency. To put that in perspective for a moment, Trump won the presidency with a 33% approval rating. He is now at 49% in Gallup. That comes off of a week that he was going through an impeachment trial. Frank Luntz, who's a pollster, he often does focus groups. Essentially, he's going to have a group of voters, some undecided, some completely against the president, and some for the president. And they'll watch State of the Union addresses. And basically they get together and they talk about how they felt and how they felt about the speech and what they heard. In this case, regarding the State of the Union.
Even the coverage is overhyped. It's overcaffeinated. So if you are a left-leaning newspaper, Donald Trump this morning, everybody hated the speech. If you're a right-leaning newspaper, it's a brilliant speech. Our group actually thought that Donald Trump was not inappropriate. They did not think that he was overly partisan. They thought it was a campaign speech for 2020, which obviously it was. But I'm afraid that the people who report the news are actually missing what the voters themselves are saying. We had two undecided voters. They moved towards Trump after the speech was done.
So I think what it ultimately comes down to is that people are moving in his direction, and they're moving in his direction the more and more that he's attacked. So what people have to learn, if you think about, the 2015 election, you had people trying to take Trump head on in a Trumpian type of way, right? You had them not being authentic to themselves. There is no better example of this than Marco Rubio, Ted Cruz, Jeb Bush. Oh, man, remember Jeb Bush? Anyway, and trying to go after Trump the same way that Trump went after them. And it just ended up looking inauthentic, and it didn't ultimately work for them. They fell off very quickly after they started doing this. So this is why I think people in America had such a bad reaction to Nancy Pelosi ripping up the State of the Union address. It's an image that we will never be able to unsee. And it's something that she will always have to answer to as to whether or not that was a positive thing for her legacy. And I think ultimately the answer to that question is no, it wasn't positive. She got a standing ovation from her caucus the next morning after this, but I think that's a far cry from what Americans felt about what she did. So the last topic that I wanted to get into today is to discuss the acquittal of the president in the Senate impeachment trial. President Trump was acquitted in the Senate on Wednesday, and here is the moment when presiding officer Chief Justice Roberts declared the president not guilty as charged.
In this article of impeachment, 48 senators have pronounced Donald John Trump, President of the United States, guilty as charged. 52 senators have pronounced him not guilty as charged. 2/3 of the senators present not having pronounced him guilty, the Senate adjudges that the respondent, Donald John Trump, President of the United States, is not guilty as charged in the first article of impeachment.
So after several months, the impeachment is now behind us. It has come to an end, ultimately the same way that everybody knew that it would, and that was an acquittal in the Senate. What everyone did not know, though, is how individual senators would cast their vote. There were a few Democratic senators on the fence, in particular Joe Manchin of West Virginia, Kristen Sinema of Arizona, and Doug Jones of Alabama. All of those senators are in vulnerable races in 2020 in districts that Trump either overwhelmingly won or swing districts. The one that surprised me the most, though, was Doug Jones of Alabama. Trump's support in Alabama is through the roof. So that one actually did surprise me. The other two, not so much, but the Alabama one did surprise me. I think he knows it's a losing battle. He's going to lose in 2020, so he might as well go down, with the approval of his party. Another thing, though, that was a surprise was I don't think anybody really thought there was going to be a Republican senator voting to convict the president. Anybody that pays attention knows that President Trump and Mitt Romney have had their battles back and forth, but overwhelmingly, Mitt usually votes with the president 80% of the time. So when Romney took to the Senate floor on Wednesday to announce his vote, I was actually so surprised with what he said. He gave Chris Wallace from Fox News an exclusive interview to discuss his vote.
Talk about the consequences. You realize this is war. Donald Trump will never forgive you for this.
There's a hymn that is sung in my church. It's an old Protestant hymn, which is, do what is right, let the consequence follow. I know in my heart that I'm doing what's right. I understand there's going to be enormous consequence. And I don't have a choice in that regard. That's why I haven't been anxious to be in the position I'm in. When I heard there was going to be an impeachment investigation, as I heard the evidence that was coming forward, I dreaded the responsibility I'd have. But I was not willing to abdicate the responsibility given to me by the Constitution, nor to ignore my conscience out of personal and political significance. Considerations. I had to follow my conscience.
So here's where I'm at with this. Mitt Romney has every right to vote his conscience, but he also in a way, and people can agree or disagree with me on this, but his vote should match his constituents. That's what he was elected for. Mitt Romney was sent to the Senate to represent the state of Utah, and the state of Utah overwhelmingly supports this president and did not support impeachment. Mitt Romney and Donald Trump go back a long way, and their battle is far from over. But what bothers me the most is that the vote isn't representative of his people. That's his job. He talks more in that interview about, having to suffer the consequences from not only the Republican Party, but the Republican voters and his state of Utah. And again, Mitt Romney can live by Mitt Romney's moral code. That's his own prerogative. He gets to do that. Nobody can take that away from him. But when you take an oath to represent your fellow constituents, then that is what you have to do. And by voting to convict the president, he did just the opposite of what the people of Utah wanted him to do. I'm not here to disparage Mitt Romney. I think that he is going to have to face his state again in 2024 if he chooses to run again. Honestly, at that point, I think he's going to be like 76 years old. Probably he'll forfeit running for the Senate again, which, may have been the reason for this vote, because it was easier to do because he probably won't run again. But again, I do feel like it wasn't a courageous vote as the news media is going to have you believe. In my opinion, I think it was just the opposite. I do want you to take a listen, though, to CNN describe the actions of Romney. This is the same man they had no problem vilifying when he was running against Obama, painting him as, the world's biggest monster. Take a listen.
Conceived in liberty and justice, that distinction is enough for any citizen. Thank you, Mr. President. I yield the floor.
Wow, that was extraordinary. That was a moment we haven't seen very often from a member of the U.S. government. That was pure honesty and emotion from Mitt Romney there, talking about how he'd be in the minority voting to convict on both of these charges, presumably with regard to the president. And John Avlon and I have been sitting here, our senior political analyst, and I mean, the words he used, how he said it was the most difficult decision I have ever faced, talked about his faith being at the heart of who I am, talked about the phone calls clearly he'd received from Republicans, stand with the team, but he put politics aside.
That was a true profile and courage speech we just heard. That was the sound of a man who'd wrestled with his conscience, who tried to think bigger than partisan politics, and ultimately kept faith with his oath, his promise to God, as he said, to do impartial justice.
What I find fascinating about this was that there were two congressmen, if you don't remember, that voted against their party with the Republicans to not move forward on impeachment articles. You had two Democratic congressmen voting with the Republicans. So they weren't buying into impeachment. And I do not remember anyone in the media talking about how courageous those Democrats were and what a vote of courage it was. I don't remember ever seeing that coverage because there was no coverage like that. Mitt Romney is a hero for one reason to the Democrats and to the news media. He's a hero because he voted against Trump. And anyone who goes against Trump is a hero to the American press corps. That is it for me today. I will be back same time next week with all the latest. If you have not followed me on Twitter yet, please do so. Beth Cahill Show. So that is at Beth, Cahill Show. Have a good week. I'll see you back next week.
This has been the Beth Cahill Show. If you have any feedback for Beth or would like to suggest a future topic or guest for the show, email Beth at thebethcahillshow.com. That's Beth at thebethcahill, spelled Cahill, show.com. Tune in again next Saturday morning at 9 for more of the Beth Cahill Show, right here on AM 1590. The Answer.